Hey everybody, it's James here with Kickstarter Board Game Spotlight. I am here with Kim Brebach, and he is the man behind Unfair. Kim, say hi.
Hi, how you going?
Good. And you'll notice he's got that beautiful, deep down Australian accent.
Yeah, I do. You'll
uh,
hear it coming out of the interview.
so Unfair currently is over $120,000, has over 2,300 backers. Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we're very, very happy with it so far.
It's your second game, because your first game was Monstrous, and it did
That's right.
1,200, a little over 1,200 backers and $37,000. That's a really big
Yeah.
jump from your first project to your second project. You want to talk a little bit about your marketing and how you've presented your company and some of the things that's helped you grow. You still got 17 days left on Unfair. Who knows where you'll end up? But can you talk a little bit about how you've made that jump?
Yeah, well, I started off with Monstrous just working with an Australian retail chain that wanted to explore the possibility of publishing. So there wasn't really a publishing business there. It was just me as the designer trying to do the best thing I could through Kickstarter. And so I guess that was my first time running Monstrous. And I think getting 1,200 backers first time is actually really a pretty solid outing as well. I mean, it's most people say you tend to get about 500, maybe give or take 100 for your first game is a fairly realistic sort of expectation, and I think that is. But we'd invested a lot of money in art for Monstrous and did a lot of work on the Kickstarter page, and I was quite active in a lot of Kickstarter communities and online communities just talking about design, because I was learning, just like you, James, you're learning so much about how you actually do this whole thing of making a game, designing a game, producing a game, getting it to Kickstarter, running it on Kickstarter, producing it afterwards, shipping, all this kind of stuff. So I was, like everybody in this business, kind of designing and learning this kind of stuff in public. So a lot of people got to hear about the game there because all the things I learned, I shared that way. So I think most of my marketing for Monstrous was very, very organic. The game looked great. It is fun. It got great reviews across the board, so that didn't hurt at all. So I think it did pretty well at 1,200. It was actually kind of still lower than what I really wanted it to be at, but still very happy with how that turned out. And now that's going into retail later in the year as well. So that'll sort of go into its sort of second life, I suppose. With Unfair, we took a different approach. The designer of Unfair, Joel Finch, he's been working on the game for about 5 years, and he's been promoting it reasonably quietly in some kind of contained circles at that point. When we first got our eyeballs onto it about 9 or 10 months ago, I think now, we were very interested straight away. I mean, you could see there was a lot of thought and depth gone into that game, and it wasn't hard to just start showing it to people and for people to be interested. I think the theme park thing is a big reason that it's successful, as well as the fantastic art direction, graphic design, the fantastic cover that it's got. It's an easy game to sell, I think, is the main thing there. But also theme parks seem to have really tapped into a fairly primal thing for a lot of people who just are like, I'm kind of looking for a really good theme park game, and I don't feel like there is one for me. Maybe this game's it, and we're tapping into a lot of that. We did also do a bit of stuff where we actually went to Gen Con, which is pretty rare for an Australian publishing company to do, but we forked out a lot of money for a big booth at Gen Con and demoed it there, and it was a bit of a hit. We had constantly turning people away from playing it, and people were waiting to play it because it looked really good, and there a little bit of buzz started to build around it, so that worked out well too.
It's very nice because it's a theme that we don't see a lot in board gaming, but it's also one of those things where if you do a theme that's outside the box, it has to be done really well. And then because most people, we just like what we like, so you didn't slap wizards and barbarians on the front, and so you're right, it does have a very beautiful cover shot. And one of the reasons that drew me in obviously was all the different art, and I knew because I work with Mr. Cuddington. They did the art for my game. They're also doing the art for Unfair. So can you talk a little bit about the art? Because one of the things I've noticed as I was playing the game at Gen Con, and then now I have a review copy here that will help me talk about it a little bit more intelligently here, is every card was its own piece of art for the most part. I mean, there's a ton of art in your game.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of started off with 4 different theme packs, so the game can be broken into these modular elements. So we've got a pirate theme, a jungle theme, robots, and a vampire theme, and they were what we presented to Kickstarter. That was kind of our minimum viable product, I suppose, in terms of a game that would work at 4 players really nicely. We've tested that and absolutely certain it would. But we've extended that with a ninja theme as well, and we're heading now towards a stretch goal that includes a gangster theme. So each of those themes has a certain number of common cards, and those cards are repeated. So by the end of it, there'll be over 300 cards in the game. About 180 of those will be unique artwork, which is a really, really large count for any game, even big LCGs or, So it's a very ambitious project. We're really trying to paint a world of theme park fun. So, and a lot of different flavors, and the artwork is very, very thematic, as you've seen. It really tries to give a lot of the feel for the theme, as well as the mechanics, names of things, flavor text, that kind of stuff. But the art is a big, big part of that.
Yeah, it was one of the things that I liked best about it when I was playing is I kind of have the option on the event cards on your turn. It kind of has a 2-option situation. You've got your top option, your bottom option. Your top option is more beneficial just for you, and your bottom options seems to be more punk your friends. And so as it kind of lets you take the game any direction you want, whereas I'm a jerk and I like to mess with everybody. So I almost always take the bottom option, even if I could take the top option and it would have more benefit for me. I don't really care. I just like to mess with people. So can you talk a little bit about your gameplay there and some of the things you got going on that's unique?
Well, I think, some people might kind of see a bit of a difference between multiplayer solitaire or Euro sort of gaming where, your interaction is limited to the choices that you make rather than what you do to each other, and make a distinction between that and sort of more traditional Ameritrash games. But I think those things are really, really blending and merging together now, and I think you really see that in Unfair. You've essentially, at its core, it is a building game where you're supposed to make a theme park. And that theme park's got to have maybe up to 5 attractions, and you've got to build them up higher and higher and stick on attraction upgrades onto each one and score points. And that's the main way you score points in the game. But the events play really gives you a chance to both amplify that kind of stuff. Maybe you'll increase or double the money that you earn in a particular turn, or get to build a bunch of stuff for free. But you've also got the option, when the time's right, really, is to use the bottom half of the event cards to try and mess with people, as you say. And really, in all the testing that we've done, you can mess with each other a lot, but the way that you tend to be able to win the game is really making the right choice about when to mess with people and when not to mess with them, and who to mess with. So you've got to be a fairly good judge of who you think is actually winning. Every now and then, some of those cards can get something for you as well as just mess with somebody. So it may not be you might not be messing with the person who's winning. You might be messing with the person who's got something that you need. But by and large, you should generally be targeting whoever's winning, I suppose, with a little bit of the take that kind of stuff. And we find that even though people may, in the first 1 or 2 games, have a bit of fun messing with each other, soon enough, once you play the game a few times, you have to spend every single action in the game correctly to win, because somebody can just do a couple more things better than you, and they'll come away with the win. It's a pretty tight game overall. So you really learn, I think, as you play the game, to be careful about how you mess with each other, and what may seem like unfettered chaos in the beginning certainly sort of turns into a bit more of a strategic affair after a few plays.
Sure. Yeah, I don't care if I win. I just like to mess with people. So I'm outside the metric normally. And I'm sure there's other players like me, but it's a lot of fun that you have that option. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like. What's the line from Batman? Some men just like to watch the world burn. Yeah, that's me, board gaming. Let's talk a little bit about shipping, because this is a big box game, and you're on the other side of the world. And I know this is one of the biggest pieces that sometimes hold campaigns back. And one of the biggest questions that the consumer and the pledge end have as far as the shipping goes. So can you talk a little bit about your solution for shipping and getting a big box game fulfilled from all over the world?
Yeah, I mean, we always hoped that we would have enough volume here to be able to put things on boats and do a decent number of items in a container off to different countries. So we'll have a shipment going to the States. We'll have another shipment then forked off from that to go up to Canada. We'll send a shipment down to Australia where we need a whole bunch of games to sell through retail here because we run some retail stores in Australia as well. And then we'll send a bunch to Germany to deal with European fulfillment as well. That covers about 85 or 90% of the world. And then we'll have send from China. We'll use those guys to deal with Asia and probably not Brazil. We'll probably send directly to Brazil. But it might be sort of air freighted to Brazil and then handled by some people we know in Brazil as well. So I guess our view is that, knowing that about 60 to 70% of people are in the US, 60 to 70% of Kickstarter backers are in the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. We really want to find a solution that worked that way. So we're just able to find the right kind of partners to work with there. And I don't know why, but US shipping is actually just as expensive as Canadian shipping if you're sending stuff from China. It's only like if you send things into the States and then things across the board through US postal services, then you pay a ton. But if you send everything directly to those countries, actually the US is a bit more expensive than sending through China once you factor in the dollar values and stuff like that. So, we've basically got free shipping, and it's about $15 worth of shipping bundled into the $50 for the game. And it's one of those things that I think people sort of forget about. There's a bit of a trend these days to tack shipping onto the end. Well, we're not doing that. You're paying kind of $50 probably about the price point you're going to pay for the game in stores, but we're paying for $15 of shipping for that, which a lot of people just can't really afford to do. Earlier today, I think I was talking about how in Kickstarter, normally in retail, a chunk of your margin, your MSRP, goes off to distribution and retail. So normally you only get 40% of your MSRP is the money that you're selling to distributors. So really Kickstarter shipping is kind of replacing a chunk of that, but it gives you a bit more room. You're not giving away 60%, you're only giving away about 30%. So we just kind of take that approach that we bundle all the shipping in free wherever we can, up to a certain level, and then any countries that are just more difficult to ship to, then we have to charge those countries extra. So for example, Europe, there's a VAT tax of about 19% when you go through Germany, and that's just a consumer tax that those guys have to and should pay. It's part of their services that they get provided with across the EU. So most of those guys don't have any problem paying that tax. The problem that they have is if you don't do it properly, it goes off to a customs office. The customs office charges you the money, and then they charge the recipient a handling fee that's more than the tax itself, often like another $10 or $15. In some countries, even more. They get, understandably irate at that just a Kickstarter creator didn't know about this kind of stuff and that kind of thing. So there's a kind of global method for doing this, which is just to send the games off to different countries and do fulfillment. It is logistically a bit complicated, but there's so many options now. We're using Happy Shops in Germany, Starlit Citadels in the States and Canada, and they can actually handle the US and Canada. And the good thing is, being on the West Coast, those guys, you can just ship straight to them from China. You minimize your road freight inside the US, and they handle the shipping across the border to Canada for you for however many Canadian copies you need as well. And then we do distribution ourselves in Australia, so we can do fulfillment here and for New Zealand. So that's the package we put together.
I've seen the Starlight Citadels being an option that most people said were more affordable for Canadian backers. So that's interesting that you say that they can handle both the US and the Canadian.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're probably a touch more expensive than their competition, but the fact that they're on the West Coast means that I don't then have to pay for road freight. And this is what a lot of people forget. It's not just the cost of sending your package from a fulfillment center. You got to pay for everything to get it to that point. So you got to pay for all the sea freight, road freight, port charges, customs fees, all this kind of stuff. So if you look at it holistically, I think you often see in US projects this kind of idea that it's maybe about $8 or $10 to ship inside the US. No, it's more like 15 to 17 in truth for most things over a kilo or so it's more expensive than people realize. I think we've kind of, as Kickstarter creators, kind of trained people into thinking about shipping in a certain way, but I'm kind of all for everybody knowing how it really works and knowing the real deal. So.
Sure, yeah. I've continued this conversation quite a bit online, but shipping was my least favorite part of the entire process, figuring everything out. knowing that you're not going to make a dime. I mean, we don't make any money on shipping. It's not like, I don't know if there's some misconception that maybe because of the old days of eBay where people would say it's $25 to ship this and it only cost them $8 and they were padding their prices. Maybe that's kind of bled over into this. But we don't make any money at all on shipping. It's just
you just lose money.
Yeah, you just lose money. And so it was very frustrating on my end. I know this is how we actually met. We were having conversations about shipping because I was searching out different methods of figuring out, and you actually introduced me to ship from China, and that's when I started talking to that company. And so that's one of the things I call out other Kickstarters on is when they've obviously not done their homework, when they have they've chosen a method that is a poor method, and they're shipping out and their pricing is way off, and you just can't do it. You've got to find the best method for your backers to get them the cheapest amount of affordable freight, but then also you're not going to make any money off of all that effort.
Yeah, no, you won't. But the way that you will make money is if you get your international shipping sorted out. In truth, most US backers who don't do that probably experience that they've got about 70 or 80% of US backers, creators, I mean. So creators will create a project, and if they don't get international shipping down as far as possible, probably going to have 70 to 80%. What that means is they've just missed out on 30% of backers they might have otherwise got, who've gone, shipping, I'm out, sorry. I'd love to support you, but I simply need to spend my money over here where I can get more stuff for my money. So I'm sure that helped with Monstrous. I had global free shipping because I did send from China, and I shipped everywhere in the world for the same free price. It was really about 10 or 11 bucks out of my 30 bundled in. But I'm sure I got a few extra 100 backers from Australia and other countries because it was free global shipping. So
I know
you'll make money back in other ways, I guess, by winning, I suppose.
Sure. I know you did because I'm looking at another campaign, or I have been, and it's someone I've met, and I've been talking to them, and before their campaign launched, I told them that their shipping was off, that the price was too high, that they weren't going to get anyone outside of the U.S. to back their game, and right now they have less than single-digit percentage of anyone outside the U.S. backing their game. It's free in the U.S., but then it's $20 for anywhere outside the U.S., and I was like, that's just they're just not going to do it.
Yeah. And look, the honest truth is 50% of the market for Kickstarter games is outside the US, literally about 50%. Just people don't believe it, but it's the truth. When you look at the BGG stats of where people on BGG are from, it's 47% from the US. It's a big, big market globally for games. We get that because we're Australian and we're at the arse end of the world, so we kind of totally understand. We have the worst shipping pain you could possibly imagine, worse than anybody, perhaps, with the exception of New Zealand. So yeah, we totally get it. One of the things about shipping is that you're going to see a new trend in the next year, and that is that companies, manufacturers that print the games are going to start printing the games and then packaging them up in quite robust boxes, shipping boxes, mailer boxes, and then sending those out globally, so that you've got a kind of standard way of your box traveling through the different postal systems, and they're going to be more and more robust. So we're going to do that with Unfair. We're going to have a really, really solid box with internal corner protectors and things like that. It's a new thing we're trying. I've seen a couple of small projects. Another one in Australia has done that, and it turned out really, really well. So we're going to follow that up, and that's going to be a new thing. And people are going to receive these chunky boxes, well protected, very, very low damage rates, and they're going to be happy with that. And getting all that stuff packed in China and made in China just means it's quite affordable, and you just ship that box out, even in cartons. If you've got to send it off to another fulfillment, will be put 6 of these pre-packed shipping boxes inside another carton and send that off to our different fulfillment services. And then they just unpack the box, stick the labels on, out they go. So we'll get some efficiencies going like that, but it only really works for certain type of projects which don't have many, many complicated add-ons that need to be sprinkled around different backers and different backer levels, that kind of stuff.
I feel sorry for anybody who does a campaign that has lots of complicated add-ons and additional things. It's already bad enough, so I couldn't imagine doing that. Right. Okay, so one of the things that I see a lot of chatter about with your game is Unfair is $50, and it's just a bunch of cards. So that's kind of the negative thing that I keep hearing over and over. Do you want to dive into that a little bit, kind of hit that head on, and
Sure.
tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I never see a game as a bunch of whatever. I see a game as an experience. And most people who play games and love those games and talk about those games, the components will not be the first thing they talk about. The experience of the game will be the first thing they talk about. And they're not going to talk about it if it doesn't have that good experience. They're just not. It's going to be blank, no matter what it looks like. It's just, you could have the best miniatures game in the world with tons of miniatures in it. If it's shit, it's shit, you know. So people talk about the game because it's a good game. You can achieve that experience in many different ways. Sometimes it's cards, sometimes it's miniatures, sometimes it's a mix of the two with the board. But what really puzzles us is that you can just reduce a game at a distance when you're not sitting at the table with it and seeing what it does on the table. You can go, what's its component count? And you can try and, you know, go, oh, I think that game should cost X. And, you know, some part of a game's cost is its basic manufacturing cost, but that is just a fraction of what a game truly costs. A game has artwork, graphic design, art direction, long-term development through multiple developers. All these things are costs that actually need to be recouped by the people who make games. Otherwise, it's just a hobby. We love it like a hobby, but we want to make a serious business out of it, and we want to recoup those costs. So the way that we do that is we go to town on the art. We spend a ton of money on the art to make games a world that you can get lost in. And it's an experience that you won't forget, and it's an experience you'll really enjoy. And what we've noticed with everyone who plays Unfair is they sit down, they play the game. At the end of it, I say, what would you say that would cost? And they tell me the number, and the number's what we're charging 9 times out of 10, maybe sometimes 8 times out of 10. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but it averages right out at the amount that we're asking for. So there's this kind of external perception about what a game's value is, but a game's value is truly what people are prepared to pay for it based on the experience they're being sold or being told they're going to have, and then their willingness to contribute to that. So we kind of took what we call, you know, the MVP, minimal viable product sort of thing, to Kickstarter, which is the model of Kickstarter, right? You take the minimum thing and you add on to it with stretch goals. So we took what we thought was a viable thing based on all our experience with both Australians and Americans playing the game at Gen Con about how much they thought it would cost. And we also know what the production costs of the game are. And, you know, there's a little bit of margin you got there about how you can make something, how much you can actually charge for something in retail. But a lot of people make this mistake that a game should cost 5 or 6 times its production costs. And that is just a ludicrous mistake to make, because one game could have $2,000 worth of art and graphic design costs. Another game could have $40,000 worth of art and graphic design costs. If both of those games sell one print run, where the hell is all that art and graphic design cost coming from? And most, literally 80% of games these days sell through one print run if they're lucky. It's a very, very few that actually sell beyond that and then get to make more money over time and become one of those kind of long-term hits. You know, obviously that's something we hope for, but there's no guarantees of that. We have to make our money back on one big print run. And so that all our costs are calculated on that. What we do bring to Kickstarter, though, is we want people to have more value, more bang for buck. So Kickstarter is great because it gives us that extra margin that we can play with to pay off all that extra art and development costs. And through stretch goals, we're adding 2 whole theme packs. The game, as I said before, comes with 4 theme packs, and that was the fundamental value in the game. But we're adding 2 more on. So we're kind of adding 50% of the value. Plus, we've got some extra cards thrown in on top, and then some component upgrades and the usual kind of stuff. Things we were all very happy with the game already, but a couple of things we wanted to sort of go, well, maybe we can do that if we get enough money. But the basic pitch of our Kickstarter campaign is that you can back the game to increase the value that you get in the game by 50%. And actually, I think that's something you very, very rarely see in a Kickstarter campaign, adding that much value into a game. We're adding a 5th player mode, and we're adding incredible variability into the 1 theme pack per player. Previously, at 4 players, we were kind of at the max. If you're playing 4 players, you're going to be playing the same game every time at 4 players with the same theme packs. As soon as we went to 5, when you're playing with 4 players, you're playing a subset of 4 theme packs from 5 possibilities. So immediately you've got more options. We take it up to 6, you do the same again. And that's what that was kind of our maximum thing that we wanted to do, is say, look, we want people to understand that the game is modular, that you can tune it and choose the theme packs you want to give a particular combined experience in that particular game. And if you want more, take that. Sure, play with the ninjas. If you want less, take that. Take the ninjas out and do some other things instead. So we wanted people to be able to tailor the way they play the game to their own particular likes, but also the way they make the game to their own particular likes. And they can change that every time they play, or they could go, look, this is the particular configuration of the game we like. We're just going to play with that for a while until we get bored of it, and then we'll change that. So, yeah, the cost things, I think we've really just tried to add value. If some people thought that it wasn't quite valuable enough in the beginning, I'd ask those people to come and have a look at it now and say, well, what does 350 cards look like for $50, and with incredibly deluxe art and 180 pieces of individual art? Does that sound like a better value proposition? And I think most people are going to say, you know what, that's pretty good.
Well, I think you're right. And I think one of the things that they say that's wrong is they all, I hear this word, they go to Dominion. There's 500 cards for $25. They must be making money. But if you look at Dominion's cards, I've got it right over there on the shelf. The majority of those cards are repeated. They're repeated pieces of art and that are just constantly repeated. Just the thing that you said there is that, I mean, you're hitting 180 pieces of original art, which, as someone who's made a game, and my game had about 32 pieces of original art, and I know how expensive that was. Yeah, it's expensive. And some of those pieces, some of the larger pieces are much more expensive than just a card piece of art. So I know how much money that you have tied up in this game and how long and how tenuous it must have been to get it to where it's at now. And so that really ties it back into it's not a fair comparison. It's not apples to apples. Dominion is not a good thing, guys. Stop using Dominion as your gauge stick. Not to mention that it's hit that second, third, fourth, fifth print run like you were talking about. It's one of those games that the margins have been stretched out. They can really take a price hit on retail at this point because they've recouped all of their sunken costs from the beginning.
That's right. And so I think they had 25 pieces of art in that game, or maybe 30 when you add up the coins, which are not particularly artistic. I mean, they're obviously drawn and that kind of stuff. So, yeah. And also, you could kind of say Dominion, because it's so modular, it doesn't hang together as a thematic experience either, really. I mean, you're building some kind of medieval kingdom. You know, it could have been anything. It's very nebulous. I don't think it would have had a patch on the art direction that's gone into this game as well. And somebody's got to do that art direction. Somebody's got to spend that time, write those briefs. Just later tonight, we're going to have a Twitch live stream session with the Mr. Cullington team, and we'll pop up our art briefs in there as well. And you get a sense we've got to write a brief like that for every single piece of art in the game. And it's not just something you pump out in 1 minute and there it's done. It's something you have to think about. There's got to be a global art brief that pulls it all together, that has the vision for the whole game, and then a minor one for each of the theme packs that comes out to go, okay, well, how's this theme pack going to feel a bit different? So, for example, with the vampire themes, we bring in purples and reds to the color palettes, you know, sumptuous Transylvanian sort of color schemes to give the idea of luxury and velvet and sumptuous, dark, slightly sinister, but also luxurious colors. And so that's kind of thinking that has to go into everything, and that thinking is value, and that value needs to be, you know, paid for in some way.
Yeah, and that's definitely with your art team, Mr. Cunnington. They really enjoy when they need more than just draw me a vampire. They want to know and be involved in the game, and that's a lot of time that you spend with that many pieces of art, talking and emails back and forth, and that time has to be recouped financially for resources. Like you said, whether you want this to be a hobby, your publishing company, or you want to make it full time, like it has to be recouped, because resources, you have to have them so that you can make your next project and that you can pay for everything that you're trying to do. So that kind of segues. Okay, I think you stamped that out. Anybody who has that argument still at this point is just they put their blinders on and they don't care about facts and information.
Well, I mean, one more thing I'll say about that, if I can quickly, James.
Sure.
There is a there are different types of gamers. There are omnivorous gamers who will walk into a game store and buy a game, or they'll see something being played in a store or at a convention and they'll go, "That looks fun. I'll go and buy that right now." I've done that myself. And then there are gamers who buy a lot of games, and they buy so many games that they have to think about every single dollar they spend on games, and so they only buy online. They do not buy from their local game store because they want to save $10 or $15 on every game. So they'll always go for online stores who cut the margins down to like tiny. They're making $5 a game or whatever, and undercutting everybody else in the industry. I have no problem with that. That's the way it works. But those gamers don't represent all gamers. They represent gamers who buy a lot of games. Fantastic that they buy that many games. Have no problem with that whatsoever. But they don't, just because they buy games that way doesn't mean that everybody buys that games that way. And that's a common mistake I see, is people saying, "I do this, therefore it's the thing that everybody does." No, that's not the way things work. There are so many people buying games, and we plan to sell these games in retail possible into the future with many expansions down the track. And we don't want people feeling in retail that they were paying a lot more down the track than people did in Kickstarter or something as well. We just want to give people more value in the Kickstarter phase. That's our basic policy.
Sure, and we appreciate that as a consumer. So
yeah.
So, okay, that segues right into the next question. What is some of your future projects? Like you said the beautiful word of expansion. But what other future projects do you have? And I know you guys just signed a Cool Mini or Not partnership. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, we have, because we're setting up shop in Australia. Australia hasn't really had much of a publishing scene until the last couple of years, and Kickstarter really enabled that to happen because we were able to then compete marketing-wise at a global level through Kickstarter. Bit of extra expense traveling to international conventions and that kind of stuff, but Kickstarter just gives it levels the playing field fantastically for us. So we've probably got about 7 or 8 games in the pipeline. So, and we've got quite an eclectic range of games because Australians are pretty omnivorous in their tastes as well. So, you get some sort of Eurogame side of things, and then a lot of hybrid sort of games and abstract social games. I mean, it's pretty much like the US is now, the same kind of spectrum of games there. But there's not many publishers here. So the games we're looking at and seeing, they're quite diverse. And when we started talking with CMON at Gamma, when we were there earlier this year, they looked at Monstrous, they looked at Unfair, and then they looked at other things we had in the pipeline, and they I think saw that we were a good fit for what they wanted to do, which is to diversify further from miniatures focused games. I think fair to say that CMON will often for a long time be known as a miniatures focused company, but they're really trying to broaden that out. You can see with games like the Grizzled Sheriff of Nottingham that they've bought the rights to, even games like getting Eric Lang on to do Blood Rage. He's a lot of experience outside of miniatures games as well. So their games are becoming a lot more eclectic, and as you probably saw at Gen Con this year, there's like a marble potion game. Potion
Explosion, yeah.
Potion Explosion looked like great fun. People are having a great time with that. There's a few party games that they've got, a lot of card games, deck builders. They're trying all sorts of different things and really diversifying, and I think it's a smart move. So because of that, that's why we thought it was a good match for us as well. They kind of were thinking in the same way as us about where we wanted to go, where they wanted to go. It was just quite nicely aligned. And the thing that we missed was that international marketing muscle that they have. They've got a great marketing sales team. They sure as hell know how to run Kickstarter campaigns, and they're not afraid of Kickstarter campaigns either. So we knew we'd still be safe running Kickstarter campaigns, and that they wouldn't somehow see that the 3,000 or 4,000 backers we might get are vaporized retail consumers. No, they're just a springboard from which retail can be more successful. And they get that. So there's a lot of reasons that it might fit. Also, they've got kind of global perspectives. They've got a team based in Brazil, a few people coming from Canada, and then they're in the States as well. And some of their guys are very internationally focused as well. So I think they have a big kind of global view of things, which we liked a lot as well.
What would you say is the next game that's most developed that'll probably go out next, type-wise? You don't have to talk about anything that you're not ready to talk about, but will it be miniatures game? Will it be a social party game, Euro game?
most ready game that we've got now is a small trick-taking game called Fairy Season, and it's probably back to a more of a kiddie kind of angle. But we've found a lot of Magic players and stuff really love it as well, because you basically goblins trying to go hunting fairies and shake out their fairy dust for your fairy brew at the end of winter. So it's kind of like an escalating number trick-taking game, but your goblins all have special powers. You're constantly raiding each other's stashes of captured fairies, and the fairies are escaping all over the place. So it's just kind of like a mess with each other trick-taking game, always trying to take down the leader. And yeah, it takes about 15 minutes to play. We're lining up some really, really fantastic artists, and that's the trick for that game, is like trying to find really, really deluxe art that brings out that theme really, really well. So that'll be a very simple one that probably comes out either very late this year or early next year on Kickstarter. We'll have an expansion for Monstrous as well. We got the Release the Kraken expansion, which is a very, very small expansion. It's like eight legendary monsters and a special land, and a Kraken card, which is a grid of 9 cards that make up a big Kraken picture. So that's a lot of fun as well. And the Kraken's kind of the centerpiece of the whole expansion, as you'd expect. And we'll do that early next year as well. Other than that, we've got some other games that I probably can't talk too much about yet, but we've got some abstract games, some more sort of fantasy guild-based kind of games that are coming out that was pretty exciting as well. We've got some sort of discussion-based party games. There's a whole bunch of things. We've got a party game that's like a word game, racing against the clock to build words against weird categories. And that's been a hit in our sort of friends' dinner party circuit. All sorts of people who've never played games playing that, just going, I need this game right now. This is great fun. Where can I buy it? It's all the feedback you want to hear. So we've got a very eclectic range of things coming.
Fantastic. Well, I know that the first time I got to see Monstrous was at Gen Con, and it's a really fun game where you're actually taking cards. It's a little bit of obviously it's dexterity. You're throwing the cards and you're trying to make them land on certain areas that have different powers that kick in once you make them land on certain areas. And so far, my son, he wasn't with me at Gen Con, but since I brought it home, he asked to play. He just calls it the monster game. Dad, let's play the monster game, and because he likes throwing stuff. So it's a really cool game. You guys should check that out, because it should be, like you said, it should be hitting retail pretty soon, right?
I think it'll probably hit US retail in November.
Okay.
So it's looking like that.
Well, Kim, this has been awesome. We've had a great conversation. I've appreciated your feedback leading up to this conversation, and I'm sure we'll keep going. But you guys, if you're creators and you have questions, Kim is an awesome dude to reach out to. He will obviously, he's just very forthcoming with all of his knowledge and wisdom that he's picked up on. So I would suggest you guys reach out and follow Unfair. Obviously, back it. It's going to be a great game. I've actually played it. It is a lot of fun. So, Kim, it's been awesome. I appreciate you coming on the show. And, good luck with the rest of Kickstarter. 17 days left. I'm sure it'll, smash it. So,
yeah, thank you, James. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. So we'll see you next time.